of positive news about this player. Maybe I should move him up in my rankings in Dynasty a little bit, maybe put some feelers out and see what I can do.
Yeah, I got a trade offer before we hit the record button for Matt Breida, and I'm like, sorry, buddy, a little bit too late. I traded a third to get Matt Breida, so I certainly don't want your third back in exchange for Matt Breida. Now, best ball was something I was going to get into this year. I told myself, hey, I'm going to get into best ball because you guys in the GOAT District chat always give me hell for not doing any best balls. And then the good state of Indiana legalized sports betting here in the state, and I have been so neck deep in player props and season win totals and just staring at this intently because, you know, I don't want to call it best ball gambling because much like poker, much like blackjack, the really talented people tend to get the money, and that's the way that it really works, especially if you want to compare it to poker. But, you know, and I thought I could have done well. You guys are like, hey, man, jump in here with us. Our ROI, or return on investment, for those who aren't familiar with that acronym. You could do well, but I'm going to try to do not well with my ROI. Apparently, I'm going to jump into the to the gambling world where you have to hit about 53%. Jerry, you got anything for Dan before we bust some of these dynasty myths?
No, I like listening to Dan talk about all his best ball stuff because it's not something I do, which is weird because I was obsessed with poker, like playing 12 tables at a time and stuff. But then for whatever reason, it's like I know if I start. It's like a tattoo. Like I don't have any tattoos because if I get one tattoo, I'm gonna have 2 sleeves, and I don't want to do that. No, that's you. That's your bit. I'm the scrawny innocent one. You're the rebel of this podcast.
It's the same reason I don't play golf. I know if I start, that's it. I'm gonna be into it all the time, and you know, trying to figure out every nuance of the game. And I've got enough hobbies. You know,
if there's one person. Hobbies. If there's one person that would not surprise me that has an entire golf course charted out, Dan Williamson.
That's why I don't do it, because I would be doing that. Absolutely. If I started playing golf, I would be figuring out all the angles and how to, you know, everything about it. I would just be sucked in way too far.
Then we're three birds of a feather, because that's how I am. I know I have an obsessive personality by nature, and I'm like, hey, this gambling thing's really fun. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to add another podcast about gambling, because I like podcasting and I like gambling. So let's do that. Dan, I'm going to save you for next. Jerry, do you want to bust a dynasty myth out there? And like we said in the open, this might be an industry myth. This might be just something that you've heard forever that when you dig deep might not necessarily be true. Jerry, hit us with a myth, kid.
Mine is a strategy myth that and you hear it all the damn time. And I feel like you're just pigeonholing yourself into one strategy if you do it. And it's the zero anything, 0 RB, 0 wide receiver. Listen, sometimes you're going to be in a draft and it's going to happen. There's just going to be value that's dropping and you're going to do it. But if you go into the draft trying to do that sort of thing, I just feel like you're missing out on so many opportunities. And there's the podfather out there with his robust running back. And then there's everybody else that's thinks they're super hipsters that wants to go 0 RB. And I can't do it. Is it anything that you guys ever do? I don't do it purposefully. I mean, I'm sure I have, 24 teams. I'm sure one of them has gone that way, but I just can't go into a draft and I can't try to do that. I feel like I'm limiting my chances to win exponentially by doing it.
Dan, I'll defer to you. Do you ever go into a draft saying I have to do this or I have to do that?
Oh, absolutely not. That's not to say I don't end up doing those strategies sometimes, but it's more of a reaction to what the room is giving me early. I mean, I think early on in the draft, you have to really take the value where it falls. And the nice thing about dynasty drafts is you can trade around to find those pockets of value, which is super cool. I mean, when you're in regular seasonal leagues, especially in these contest leagues, you can't trade around at all. So you're just stuck with what you get. And so you get real good at drafting out of each position and, okay, this is how it's unfolding. So, I'm going to go this way. I've been getting a lot of running back value early. So this is going to be a robust RB team and I'm going to just finish it off that way. Because you do need structural elements to your drafts. I do feel strongly about that. But if you try to force a draft into a specific set of a structural element and the draft doesn't want to go that way, you're going to end up with a much worse team. So I totally agree with Jerry.
I do too. And first of all, before I tell you my take on this, anytime you call anything modified, I call bullshit. Hey, it's modified zero RB. Nope, you're just drafting regular. No, it's modified robust RB. Bullshit. You're just drafted. If you try to modify, quote unquote, modify anything, then it's not one way or the other. But I'm with Dan. I'm with Jerry. I don't lock myself in. There have been many times where I've been in a draft, especially dynasty drafts this year, and I'm like, there are so many people who are on the robust running back thing because let's face it, Matt Kelly, very popular podcast host, got a very broad network and casts a very wide net, and he's been a very big proponent of robust RB, and I've seen the impact of that on drafts this year. But in one of my dynasty startups, I'm like, Michael Thomas is here at the 110. I will take Michael Thomas at the 110. And then I think I wound up with Nick Chubb. I think it was either Nick Chubb or Miles Sanders on the very next round. If you tell me that I'm starting any dynasty draft with Michael Thomas and Nick Chubb, I am happy. It doesn't have to be Miles Sanders and Nick Chubb. And it doesn't have to be Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb. We're going to get to Mixon later. But I am more than happy to let the board fall to me. And we talked about poker earlier, and I know Dan probably feels the same way. You got to be able to read the room. What are these guys doing? Are they overvaluing quarterbacks? Are they overvaluing running backs? And you have to alter your strategy from pick to pick based on what's going around you, especially if you're on the end. So, Jerry, that is a hell of a myth to bust right out of the gate. Dan, what are you busting with your first myth buster?
Well, I think, as Jerry was talking about, just not allowing yourself to get stuck in a particular strategy, I think you're throwing away value in the first round if you're, because it's now okay to take running backs in the first round. Before it was all wide receivers. Now running backs are okay. And everybody is really hot on Zeke, Kamara, Dalvin Cook, and guys like that. And to me, I think you're just really throwing away value if you take those guys because of the situation that they find themselves in, as well as, what's going on in 2020. I mean, I don't think this is a great year to be all in on, like a dynasty, like a winning team. If you're doing a startup this year, I'm more interested in, having a team that has the assets where if I decide I can go for it and I can win this title, I can do what I need to do that. Or if it's better off to wait for next year, I can sell off some assets. So I've been a little bit more middle of the road than I usually am this year. And that steers me away from the Zeke, Kamara, Dalvin Cook win now pieces, especially with their age and where they're at in their contract situation or where they're at in their cycle as a running back. Because Zeke he's got 4 years right now in the league. And once he gets to about 5 or 6 years, his value is going to really start to tank. Same thing with Dalvin, same thing with Kamara. They've both only been in 3 years, but you're still going to see the same thing. They're both looking for second contracts. They could have messy holdouts. There's a lot of ways their value can tank. And I think it's a lot better, instead of, drafting like Zeke with the 105, why don't you go out and make a trade? You can go out there and you can trade Zeke plus, like an 11th rounder, and you can end up with the 206 and 307 or something like that. And you can end up with Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift, and that's a much better place to start from than just a Zeke Elliott who is going to be hitting the wall sooner rather than later. So what do you guys think about that?
Gerald?
So you have just 100% hit the nail on the head for Jerry's startup draft strategy. I usually, and it's not because of 2020, but it does have a part in it. Running backs just scare the hell out of me when it comes to dynasty drafts because we've seen guys that won leagues and then not very long after have just tanked. What's Todd Gurley's value? What's David Johnson's value? And
exactly.
And there's going to be these other guys that everyone is super gaga over. Within 20 months, they're going to be in that category too. And it's unfortunate and it sucks and you can't predict it in every single case. But I like the Zeke and I like the Dalvin Cook comparisons. I mean, if Alvin Kamara comes out and doesn't thrive or he doesn't have a healthy touchdown season like he didn't in 2019, his ADP is going to start dipping. That value is going to start dipping. So I like that a ton. And I do tend to like to trade back. Randy just tweeted out something about what everybody's favorite dynasty strategy is. Mine is to trade back in the startup and accumulate the next year's first round picks. It usually does not result in me having a great team that first year, but as long as you have an equal amount of picks by the time you hit the double-digit rounds, like if you trade back from a first and you get a third or whatever, as long as it's an equal amount, you still have a good team. You still have 10 players in the first 10 rounds, plus you have multiple assets that are only going to increase in value with first round picks. So love it, Dan. Brilliant as always. Randy, what do you got?
Well, first of all, I want to comment on Dan. Dan's 100% right. Running backs, especially those top five, and I don't think Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, Zeke are immune from this. I mean, if Todd Gurley has taught us anything, is that you can be riding high on the hog one year and down in the mud and the slop the next. You know, running back from a value position, if you look at like a stock market chart, that kind of a graph where you have peaks and valleys, the running back dynasty value has a much sharper peak than wide receivers. Whereas once a wide receiver like a Devontae Adams, once his peak hit, he's just kind of right and he's plateaued and he'll stay there for a couple of years. Then there'll be more of a gradual decline. Whereas a running back, they shoot to the top of the mountain, which you'll see in the next couple of years with guys like Jonathan Taylor, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then in a couple of years, they'll go equally as sharp down. That's why when I build, I don't always do that. Again, the draft comes to me. But if I see a wide receiver that I like, that I think can be a stable asset for 2, 3, 4 years, I'm in there. And then the last thing is they also get batted around by just name fatigue. At some point, Zeke fatigue is going to set in with people. They've seen him for 5 years. They don't give a rat's ass that he's put up 18 PPR points a game. They want the new hotness. Zeke's old. We talked about this last week with Shane Manella. We know we don't want that. We don't want old and busted. Zeke's been around too long. We want the new hotness. We want Chuba Hubbard. We want Travis Etienne, or we want second-year DeAndre Swift, and Zeke's trash. So those guys are fighting all of that. And Dan, I couldn't agree more. And that's why I'm going to roll into my first myth, and that's Joe Mixon is not an RB1. And damn sure not. I mean, let me rephrase that. He is an RB1 in a startup. He's just not a round one running back for me. The back-to-back 1,100 rushing yard seasons are great. But if any Christian McCaffrey, even David Johnson's one big season in 2016, Zeke, when he was Zeke had some good receiving years too. Todd Gurley had a monster receiving year the year that he absolutely exploded. I think that was 18. Look, dude, Joe Mixon has never in 3 years in the league had more than 286 yards receiving. He's never averaged more than 3 targets a game. That is a problem in a PPR league. I get that he's only 23, going to be 24. You know, if I were to give you guys a piece of paper, a list of all 32 teams, and I told you guys to rank the coaching staffs in the NFL, I would be shocked and amazed if you came back and said that there was a worse coaching staff, top to bottom, than the Cincinnati Bengals. And he's already going into year 4. We just talked about how volatile the value of running backs is. We're going to see Swift emerge, and we're going to see CEH, and we're going to see Taylor, and then next year I mentioned Chuba and Etienne and all these guys. What do you think is going to do to Joe Mixon's value? Diggstown. It's going to be, you're going to lose value. If you draft him at the first round in a dynasty startup right now, you are losing equity. The guy for his career has averaged 13.9 PPR points a game. You know, that's almost full 3 points a game less than Leonard Fournette over his career. That's about, we'll call it 3 points less than Dalvin Cook. You know, it's about the same as Chris Carson. It's about the same as James Conner, who barely played his rookie year. And it's significantly less than Kareem Hunt, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, and I already mentioned Dalvin Cook. You are buying this guy if you take him in the round 1 of a startup. He is not a round 1 asset. That is fool's gold. That is a myth. Dan, am I crazy? I think I want to get your support because you're a running back guy.
Right. Well, I'll put it this way: if I'm telling you not to draft Zeke, Kamara, and Cook, I'm darn sure telling you not to draft Mixon in the first round. And again, it kind of comes down to that same concept. You want to have your early assets in a startup as liquid as possible for as long as possible, and that's why you want to take assets that are still ascending rather than assets that are peaking. And you can make an argument, well, this might be Mixon's peak year coming up, and I'll even buy that. It could be, it's possible. I don't know that I would bet on it, but it's possible that could happen. But still, you're going to be looking at, by the time you want to turn around and move him, or by the time, if you're not competitive this year, already his value is starting to fall. So you want to be grabbing, as you were talking about, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, those guys that are their assets on the rise, that will probably be worth the same or more a year from now than what they're worth right now. And, later on in your dynasty draft, sure, you can grab, mature players who are going to give you those productive points. And it's a very important part of a winning strategy. But here in the early round, you've got to be focused on what assets are going to be worth a year from now and take the ones that are going to be worth the most, rather than, and that almost takes you out of the whole first round, I think. Almost every player in the whole first round is going to end up being worth less probably next year than they are this year. What do you think, Jerry?
I fully agree with you. And what was the yardage total that you said, Randy, for his receiving yards?
He has never had more than 286 receiving yards for an entire season. And he played a 13-game season, and he's played a 15-game season. Now, he was coming off back-to-back almost – we'll just average and say he's averaged about 1150 on the ground the last 2 years.
Which is good, but what is the narrative around Joe Mixon, that he's the supreme pass catcher? And honestly, I didn't realize the number was that low. That is flabbergasting, to use an old person word. That's insane. And I like Joe Mixon. If I was ever going to invest in Joe Mixon, it's probably right now. It's not in the first round, like you guys said. If I can get him in the middle of the second, or where in Scott Fishbowl, I think I got him at like 207 or something. So I'm fine with doing that. But I'm with you that I think, and not to use something that friend of all of ours does not like, Nathan Pilmer, upside. The upside is built into this man's ADP currently. You're drafting him at a spot that we've all magically anointed him to be at, that this is going to be his production level, and it just hasn't hit. Not to say it can't hit, but you're wishing in one hand and you're shitting in another, and which one's gonna fill up first? I can't bet on that all the time. I would like to disagree with you, Randy. I don't like agreeing with you as much as we are, but I'm with you. It's a stretch. It's a total stretch.
I just want to drive home 2 points both of you guys made, because you both said it very well. Dan's right. You want your top-end assets to remain as liquid as possible. What does that mean? That their value is going to stay, it's like a stock. It may go up a little, it may go down a little, but more often than not, you want to be able to cash out if you need to at around that value. And I feel like you're buying Joe Mixon with no equity to gain. There's very little. I mean, he's going like the 107 according to now that's in a 1 QB. He's going at the 107. How much more liquid, how much more equity can you build into that?
Can he get higher? Like, what would he have to do to move up that much higher? I don't know if it's even possible. Like, is he going to get drafted ahead of Christian McCaffrey or Saquon, even if he does perform better? I don't really think he is.
That's a great call. All right, Dan, back to you, man. Give us another myth to bust here in the dynasty world.
Excuse me. Well, one mistake a lot of dynasty players make is they want to treat their tight ends like all the other positions. And tight ends are kind of like wine. If they weren't very good to start with, they don't age well at all, but the best ones are going to age really well. And they're going to improve their value to ADP ratio, well into their early and mid 30s as people kind of abandon them, especially in the dynasty format. Looking for those, they want the TJ Hawkinson and the Noah Fant and, guys like that, Irv Smith. And there's nothing wrong with those, with tight ends like that. I enjoy owning them too, but you better believe that I'm going to save some spots towards the back end of my roster for some older tight ends, because I'm going to get a lot of productivity out of them. And, it's going to be a good use of kind of those back end roster spots, because they, again, age really well. As long as they have a few things going for them, as long as they're getting a lot of expected targets, as long as they have a good position on their team's target totem pole, like they're second or maybe third at worst on the team's target totem pole, as long as their snap percentage is high and they're not staying in on pass plays to block, if their red zone usage is high. Those are kind of the keys that I look for. And if you can find older tight ends who can check off 3 or 4 of those boxes, you're going to find probably a pretty productive player at a really good price.
Well, I saw your tweet earlier that involved Zach Ertz. And this is the hypocrisy of the Dynasty, not only general public, but the Dynasty analyst community out there. We're all ready to drag old Zach Ertz out back and put one behind his ear because he's going to be 30 in November. But yet at the same time, no one's speaking out against taking Travis Kelce in the top 2 rounds. And he's going to be 31 in October. He's 13 months older than Zach Ertz. And it's because something I'm going to get into later. It's because these people are blinded and dug so deep into their Dallas Goedert love that they're just like, hey, Zach Ertz, here's your hat. What's your hurry? They're just pushing him right out the door because he's 30. He's going to be gone. I got news for you. Doug Peterson, he likes Zach Ertz. You know who else likes Zach Ertz? Carson Wentz likes him a hell of a lot. How do I know? I don't know. All those beautiful targets that he throws. And you know what Zach Ertz is going to get this year? A lot of those beautiful targets because Alshon Jeffrey more than likely going to start on the pup. Marquise Goodwin opted out. That leaves Djax. That leaves Jalen Reagor. And, yeah, Goddard can still eat. He can be a tight end, 10, 11, 12. But that doesn't stop Zach Ertz from being a top 3 tight end. Dan's spot on for me. I am with him on busting this tight end. They age like a fine wine. And if people are throwing Zach Ertz out because he's quote-unquote old in your league, you need to be kicking tires. Jerry, where are you at on old tight ends?
It is ironic because I am sitting here podcasting with you fine gentlemen as I drink a cheap $6 bottle of wine that will age like Gary Barnage. I like it. And here, admittedly, I was one of those people that really hated it. And when we did our 3-team parlay, Randy, and you talked about the Seattle Seahawks, I just was, to use flabbergasted again, to see, I'm just pulling the great words out, flabbergasted by your love for Greg Olsen and the value that he had. And I argued and argued and I argued and I cried like a little child until he got dragged to his room. And you know who I have acquired more since that podcast than probably every other human being in fantasy football is Greg Olsen, of all people, because it's so cheap. And people do hate him. People hate Travis Kelce. Listen, Travis Kelce's startup value, yeah, 2nd round, maybe early 3rd round. His trade value, he's even cheaper than that, man. You can definitely get these old guys because new hotness, man. Everybody wants to tell you about Noah Fant and TJ Hawkinson and everything else. And Dan, I loved the tweet. I saw it too earlier, and I loved every second of it. So I'm glad you brought it up, and I think that was a good one.
Hey, do you remember last year when Will Dissly got hurt in Seattle, and all of a sudden Jacob Hollister became the de facto starter at tight end for the Seahawks?
Oh yeah, and he killed it.
Yeah, he played 10 games with Russell Wilson, and he had 59 targets and 41 receptions. So that's 6 targets a game, four receptions a game, and he averaged about 35 yards, and he had 3 TDs. It's not great, but guys, if you extrapolate that out over the course of a season, that's a tight end 1. And I'm here to tell you, he may be like 35 years old, but Greg Olsen, he 10 times the tight end that Will Dissly and Jacob Hollister ever be. I know Dan's a best ball guy. Dan, before we get Jerry's next myth, are you picking up any Greg Olsen? I know I've put this in the GOAT chat. I'm not crazy. I mean, I am, but I'm not.
Well, you might be crazy, but not for that reason. Yeah, I'm picking up a ton of Greg Olsen. I mean, whether we're talking Dynasty, best ball, or whatever. I also like a little bit of Tyler Eifert in there because of the fact that everybody just throws up in their mouth a little bit when they hear his name. But you've got to understand he's going back to good old Jay Gruden, who he had his best years with, and he was a red zone beast. And here we have Gardner Minshew playing the role of Andy Dalton, just a gunslinger. and he's going to throw some interceptions, but he's going to throw some touchdowns too. And Eifert is so ridiculously cheap. He's even cheaper than Olsen. So if you're looking for those older cheap guys, Olsen, Eifert, heck, even Kyle Rudolph, he can fit in there. There's some great ones to pick out, but I love Olsen because Russell Wilson is a tight end kingmaker. He just loves throwing to the tight end when it gets down close in the goal line, because who's going to catch it? Tyler Lockett? Not that many. No. DK Metcalf, does he really trust him in those tight quarters to be able to bust three? No. DK Metcalf does better on the longer routes where he has a little bit more room to move. But you get a big guy who can body out and give Russell Wilson a target, he's going to hit it every time. And that's his tight end. So that's what he keeps throwing to. And that's why we keep seeing those great tight ends in Seattle.
Hey, this is why we bring Dan on. We can talk Dynasty. We can talk redraft. We can bust myth. We can do it all. Dan's the fantasy renaissance man. All right, Jerry, we need another myth to bust.
This one is going to be a little lazy for you and the listeners of the War Zone, because I say it all the time, and yet it's like it's etched in stone somewhere, and all Dynasty players just loved it. And I don't want to say all. I overreached when I said that. Inexperienced Dynasty players play this game in certainties, where the players that they love are always going to hit, and there's no possible way that anything bad could happen, because Darius Geis got injured, so therefore he was always going to be bad. And then come to find out he's a horrible human being, and this happens. But unpredictable. There are so many things, and just acquiring rookie picks that are always going to hit, and just everything. Getting second round picks. Randy, we do plenty of trades where I just throw away rookie picks to you because I don't value them, because I know that there is a very good chance it is not going to be worth a wet fart after a night of drinking, and I don't want to deal with that. But there's always these situations where, Jonathan Taylor is going to be the RB1 by next year, so I'm going to trade ungodly things for him, or anything. DK Metcalf's going to be the wide receiver one. And there's every single outcome that can happen is possible. We live in a crazy universe of a crazy sport of an oblong shaped ball where anything can happen. Stop playing in certainties. You need to hedge your bets with roster construction, with different values of different players. Even if you are convinced that a player is great, that does not mean you should accumulate tons of them. I have learned that lesson with Darius Geis today. Well, not today, but this week. I had, what did I say, Randy? In the Patreon chat, I think 13? I had, some absurd amount of shares.
11 or 13. It was bad.
An absurd amount of Darius Geis shares because his value was so good, and I was accumulating so many shares of him because it was cheap, and sorry, Nate, to use upside again, I bought into the hype. That's a mistake. I made a mistake that I need to learn from because of that move. You have to diversify if you have multiple leagues. And I'm assuming most of you do, because you've been listening to a Dynasty podcast for the last several months of quarantine. So you're a degenerate, just like the two men that I'm sitting and talking with.
But I don't think that necessarily the Geis move in particular doesn't necessarily make you crazy. I mean, Geis is a totally separate, different thing. Dan, anything on this before I jump in on Jerry?
No, I think he's exactly right. I mean, one of my favorite things every season is the first Sunday, week 1 of the NFL season on Twitter, as the NFL starts splintering, folding, mutilating everybody's dreams about how they are sure this season is going to come about. And it's just breathtaking. It's like watching a huge crash, at the racetrack, or, watching a train derail or something. There's almost an elegant beauty about the destruction that happens to everybody's dreams on that first week. So I like to take a mental snapshot of that and remind myself of that. And I just have, I have a little page of notes that I look at when I draft. And the first thing is, remember week 1. And then I think about that and I realize I probably shouldn't be quite so certain.
Yeah. And I'm just going to add this to Jerry's myth there, is that people On Twitter, it's a negative cesspool of bullshit unless they like a player. Then that son of a bitch has got rainbows and sunshine shooting out his asshole at light speed because they couldn't be more positive. They couldn't see a way that this could fail. You know, and that's not a myth that I'm here to bust. But that's one thing that if you're a savvy dynasty owner, and that's, again, why I love having Dan on, because Dan does this. Whenever I send Dan a trade offer, and we never make trades very often, Dan will stop. He will pause and he will say, first of all, why does Randy want him? What is he seeing that I'm missing? What could be? What couldn't be? And because Dan thinks that way, he's very hard for me to do business with. And you need to adopt that strategy yourself. When someone sends you something, it doesn't mean they know something you don't, but you need to ask yourself, why are they thinking the way that they are? What are they seeing that I'm not? You know, if someone says Kyler Murray, which I've been on this train for a little while now, if Kyler Murray could struggle this year, instead of saying he's a jackass and not affirming what I want him to say, you need to ask yourself, why is he saying Kyler Murray can struggle? And where are the pitfalls? And am I overpaying? And when you adopt that mindset, it'll make you a more well-rounded owner. And I'm going to roll right into mine because I'm rolling. Stop forcing yourself to draft a quarterback 101 in your rookie superflex leagues. You do not have to do that. It is not a law. Now, if you have an otherworldly talent, the quote-unquote the chosen one, like an Andrew Luck, who, barring injury, he actually played real well throughout his very short career. Or if you got a guy coming up this year like a Trevor Lawrence, okay, I get it. But how many Baker Mayfields and Josh Rosens and Sam Darnolds do you have to draft before you realize that it's a super flex league, I got to take a quarterback? I mean, I'll just go back to 2018. The first three quarterbacks off the board in every ADP that I could find were Baker number 1, Sam Darnold number 2, Josh Rosen number 3. Then it was some combination of Lamar, mostly Lamar, and then I was getting Josh Allen. I got him in one of our GOAT leagues at like the 301 because people didn't like his college tape. And I want to get into the rookie analysis here in just a bit, but you don't have to. People are doing that this year. I feel like people are sleeping this year on Justin Herbert. They let him go at 110, 111 in some drafts. There's going to be value at the quarterback position. You don't have to draft Joe Burrow 101 if you really like Jonathan Taylor. It's just kind of like it's kind of a mini piggyback off of the one that Jerry was ranting on earlier about, having to have a certain philosophy going in. Dan, you've been in many drafts with me. Do you feel like you have to take a rookie quarterback? No, Dan, hold on. Dan's a damn good player, so very rarely would Dan ever have a 101. But if he did somehow manage to sucker some sucker out of a 101, if you had one in a superflex, Dan, do you feel, again, unless it's a Trevor Lawrence or an Andrew Luck, do you feel like you have to draft a quarterback there?
No, I definitely don't. And as a matter of fact, for my myth, and I'm just going to go ahead and fold mine right into yours because they're really, they're kind of talking about the same thing. Quarterbacks on their first contracts are not safe havens of value, at least not until they've registered one top 12 season. And, the corollary to that is that the truly elite quarterbacks are usually precocious right out of the box. So to me, it's real easy to tell once they've been on the job. But the problem is we've got to make those draft picks before they get on the job, and when you look at players, we think we're on a good roll with quarterbacks, but that's also just our confirmation bias talking. We've got, if you want to take a look at Mahomes and Lamar and Allen, Josh Allen, guys like that, they're doing great. We've got Kyler Murray, and we're all excited about him. We got Deshaun Watson. We got Dak Prescott. Let me read you off some of the top drafted quarterbacks over the last few years. Blake Bortles, 103. Now, this is NFL draft, not fantasy draft. Mitchell Trubisky, 102. Marcus Mariota, 102. Jameis Winston, 101. Sam Darnold, 103. Baker Mayfield, 101. Josh Rosen, 110. How many of those quarterbacks are you really happy with if you bought them with a 101 in your rookie draft?
There's your answer. None. Absolutely none of them.
I mean, Sam Darnold was one of the guys I was going to use as an example. I mean, I love Vegas. I love RJ Bell and Steve Fezzik from the Dream Preview podcast, as well as Straight Out of Vegas. And they were doing their team by team breakdown, and they were talking about Sam Darnold. And Vegas guys use QBR. They say it's the best stat for measuring quarterback play. And Sam Darnold, over the last few games that he come back, even though the team won, he was well below the midpoint of QBR. And that they were referencing a Pro Football Focus model. And his comps at this point in his career, hold on to your hats: Blake Bortles, Geno Smith, Christian Ponder, and Mark Sanchez. And you invested the 103 in a 2008 running back class. You may have passed on Nick Chubb, as well as several other running backs. So I can't do it, Jerry. Anything to add? Since Dan rolled his up, you can tell us if you're a QB 101. Now Jerry, on the other hand, has had many a 101 in his day. So you can tell us, Jerry, when you're on the clock, not if, when you're on the clock, what are you doing with your 101s?
I have a weird thing where I love to just explode teams. So I have had my fair share of 101s in my life. It depends on the situation. I did draft a fair share of Mr. Kyler Murray at 101. But I don't think, and I had a few this year, I don't think I drafted Burrow with any of them. I'm pretty sure I went JT or CEH. Once again, diversifying to loop back with my old one. So no, I like it. I'm not. And listen, if it's in a startup, I do not mess around with quarterbacks. I do not like to be the person that has a quarterback problem, because if you have a quarterback problem, you have a very big problem in most of your leagues. But for whatever reason, when it comes to rookie drafts, I don't go crazy about them. But to go into my myth, it is the number one word that I use when we do this podcast, Randy. The most said word by Jerry on this podcast is narrative, because the narrative around certain players is so cancerous to the success of some of the people that they tell it to. Sony Michel was a person as a prospect that was one of these great, wonderful assets that was going to change fantasy teams for the future. He was going to be one of these Ezekiel Elliott types. And now that dude isn't worth wet socks. It's popular. It was so popular to be on Sony Michel, and now it's so popular to be off Sony Michel. And if you're not learning to not trust everybody, I can't help you. And I know, we're just trying to make you better. And I'm not saying to trust us, but you need to learn from the mistakes. If you look at the pinned tweet at JerrySin DWZ, it's my first Dynasty team, and the only reason I have it on there is because I want to learn from the mistakes I've made with the first team I ever had, because it's the one that I want to win so bad, because my friends are evil, awful human beings that rub my nose in it that I talk on a podcast, and I haven't won that league yet. So I want to learn and I want to grow. And that's one of the things is you can't just believe the common misconceptions. Randy has made a killing in leagues that I have seen this man in, because he goes after the quarterbacks that everybody hates, and he gets them at a stupid value. Like, what did you say? Josh Allen in the third round?
I also didn't mention Daniel Jones. I was getting a lot last year in the mid to late second. And give me the quarterback everybody hates.
It's because there's so much value in that situation, because everybody hates them and they fall. And it's something that I will fight until I stop recording my voice on this podcast, because it is something that continuously comes up. If it is popular to dislike a player, or it is popular to love a player, it really overblows everything, and it can be detrimental to the people that they're trying to help. And I don't think they're trying to hurt people when they say it, but the problem is they hear something. It's an echo chamber. There's another word that I say all the time on this podcast is the problem. It sparks and the fire starts and then it spreads. And it's just something that I think we need to just step back and see all possibilities of the situation and not just regurgitate the same vomit that we're hearing day in and day out.
Dan, anything to add?
Yeah, I think you guys hit it on the head there, and I think the narrative is a super important thing. I mean, Joe Burrow has a lot of narrative going around him, and he's got a ton of buzz and everything else because the record-setting offense at LSU. But you look at where he's going. He's going into the AFC North. That's kind of the belly of the beast. They're going to chew him up and maybe spit him out. And yet you've got to use like 101 or 102 to get Burrow in your league. You might find some people who are taking Edwards-Helaire over Burrow now that Edwards-Helaire has the job to himself. But, for me, if I've got that pick where I could take Joe Burrow, I'd rather trade for like Matthew Stafford and probably still have something left over. I mean, I think you ought to be able
almost guaranteed you're getting a plus with that side.
Right. Exactly. And why not just give yourself a Stafford who's 31, 32 years old, something like that. I think he's 32. He's got years in front of him. We know what he is. We know what he can do. So, why take that unknown Joe Burrow you might be throwing away, instead get Stafford and then, get some other small piece that can help you out in some other way. Because everybody likes that new hotness, as you were talking about, Jerry, earlier, the upside, and that gets all wrapped into the narrative. And I think, that's all kind of the same concept. You just need to step back and say, this might not be as sexy, but it's probably going to be more productive. And that's the way you want to go in Dynasty more often than not.
And don't sweat it if it's not sexy either, because
Right.
let's say you do trade Joe Burrow and you get Matthew Stafford and you get something else, and then you post a trade poll on Twitter and then you get vilified, and then you feel bad and you don't want to do those things. No, piss off. Those people are probably bad at this game too, so you should be happy that they don't like what you're doing.
I love this, and I'm going to wrap this one up, and I'll go right into mine. But I've often heard it said, find the way the general public is going and go in the opposite gosh darn direction. Run as fast in the opposite direction as you can. Because you know what? More people watch the Kardashians than watch the nightly news. That don't make that shit entertaining. That doesn't mean it's something that I want to be into. Just because it's popular doesn't mean it's right. And that rolls me right into this one, and this will be a great one to take us home. So disclaimer alert, this is not directed at anyone in particular, so don't get your panties in a knot. I'm not sitting here lobbing grenades at people. This is an in general thing of what we do. So many fantasy analysts are just super fans. We talked about earlier, we all went around the room, we talked about the majors that we had in college. None of us are journalists. Remember, the word fan is short for fanatic when you're listening to your favorite podcast. All of these guys, not all, but I try real hard not to. They have a bias to their favorite local team, to their favorite college team, to certain players, to guys that they scouted since they were basically in diapers, and they just can't go. I want to ask you a question. Jerry, can I ask you a question?
Oh, boy. Okay.
How in the blue hell can you trust a quote-unquote analyst with a goddamn player's name in his Twitter handle?
What do you mean? What do you mean? They're not biased?
I don't think that as it relates to that player, you're going to get an accurate or unbiased opinion. And if they're not going to give you an accurate and unbiased opinion on that player, what are they going to do to the players they hate? They're not going to give you an accurate and honest opinion. And those biases creep into everything. It creeps into their biases, creep into your lineup. And they advocate holding on to, overdrafting, and overpaying for guys that they just can't let go. There's this picture that it's kind of a meme, but it's like more of an inspirational quote. It's a picture of a hand holding a big handful of barbed wire. And it says people would make a lot less mistakes if they weren't so, hard-headed about holding on to them. Guys, I love Sam Darnold. 2 years ago on this podcast, I was, carrying a big old bass drum, one of those shoulder strap gimmicks, and I was whacking the drumsticks on both sides of it, all the Sam Darnold. Guys, I'm off. I've been off Sam Darnold for a while. I got to put the pom-poms down, but that's what's going on out there. And these guys rarely pivot. And again, if you were the person that was advocating drafting Baker Mayfield at the number 2 overall, and then the furthest you'll come back is saying that you should be drafting him 10 or 11, you've got a bias. You have got a bias for Baker Mayfield. And that's not any one person. I hear this shit all the time, and I want to throw myself on a barbed wire fence again. Because he's been QB 16, he's been QB 20, he's got a head coach that wants to run the ball, and we cannot help overdrafting Baker Mayfield and leaving Jared Goff on the goddamn sidelines because we've all been convinced by our favorite podcast host that Jared Goff's a big shiny turd. And you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. Again, I want to throw this to Dan, and I want to champion Dan. Anytime you question everything, anytime, and I'm not saying these people are bad people, and I'm not saying they're inaccurate, but Socrates said, I cannot teach anybody anything. I can only make them think. And I'm just trying to make you think the way that Dan thinks, because it's a line of thinking that I really respect, is who, what, when, where, how. Why is this player being advocated for? Who's advocating for him? Why are they advocating for him? Where am I being told to draft him? When am I being told to move him? Because if you're not asking who, what, when, where, how, you're doing it wrong. Dan, I'm off my soapbox.
All right. I love that soapbox. I am also a big fan of knowing who has ties to which players and why, and to just be able to, discount those opinions. That's not to say that I don't respect what they're saying. That's not to say that I don't take what they have to say under advisement, but it also means that I got to have a big old grain of salt going down with that, because they probably are looking at things a little bit too rosy. Maybe everybody else might be looking at it a little too negative, but there's one thing for sure. If that analyst has been championing a player or team, or it's their favorite team, like if you want to talk to me about the Vikings, that's fine. And I definitely have a little bit of a bias. I probably like Adam Thielen a little bit more than most everybody else based on, what I think he's going to do. But on the other hand, you have to be able to set those biases to the side. And one thing that really helps me do that, just to bring it back around to best ball, is, when you were talking about Baker Mayfield, I immediately thought about best ball. And in best ball, Baker Mayfield is a back-end quarterback too, which tells us exactly what people think he's going to do this year. We know what he did in year one. We know what he did in year two. And both times he's a quarterback too. And this year we're saying that we expect him to be a back-end quarterback two at best in the best ball world. So that tells us what we think is going to happen this year. So in what world is that worth a quarterback one? But we have dynasty players who they never get into the best ball, and so they don't ever really see that portion of it, and they just keep sitting in their echo chamber talking about Baker Mayfield, or substitute any player you want. We shouldn't pick on Baker all the time, though he's fun to pick on. But that's what you need to be looking at, is why, if redraft and dynasty rankings are different, why are they different? And what kind of biases is that exposing in the dynasty side or the redraft side?
Jerry, you're used to my rants at this point, a couple of years in.
I am. And this is one I like, because this is one that consumes my life outside of fantasy too. I am spending ungodly amounts to be a historical researcher. And if there is one thing you must do, is you have to understand why the source material that you're reading is telling you what they're reading. Like, if you ignore contrarian evidence, then I know you are not trying to find the facts. You are not trying to find reality. You are trying to evangelize your own truth. If you love Baker Mayfield, and someone like Randy, who is quite open about his negativity towards him, comes at you with some evidence and you ignore it, you're not trying to actually help people in an analysis of Baker Mayfield. And I know we're piling on him, but I'm using him as an example. You're trying to just spew your own opinion. And this is one of these don't speak in certainty sorts of things again. There is a contrarian evidence to just about everybody, and you need to weigh and measure the amount for each one and determine each by themselves. And you can't, for the love of all that is good. Just stop obsessing with these people, because anything can happen, and it's absurd. And I hear you, Randy. I love it. I'm with you, and it's just something. It's something, and I hear you. And
and I've said this before, it's like people, if you want to get better at anything, guys, fuck Dynasty, throw it out the window. I don't give a shit. Anything. If you only go to places that affirm what you already believe, you're never going to grow as a person. If you're a conservative and you only get your news from Fox Sports, you're never going to grow as a person. If you're a liberal and you only go to MSNBC, you're never going to grow as a person. If you want to be affirmed, Jerry, what I posted the other day, it was a picture of Buzz and Woody from Toy Story. People don't want to hear your opinion. They want to hear their opinion coming out of your mouth. And that's the world we live in. And that's not what I'm here to do. I don't give a rat's ass if anyone likes this or not. I'm going to tell you what I believe and what I think will help you. I'm not here to hurt anybody. I'm not here to say any other podcaster is bad. I listen to more podcasts than just about any average human on this planet. I listen to 6 to 7 hours of them a day. And I don't listen to the same ones all the time. I rotate in new ones. I rotate in the podcasts of the guys I'm in leagues with. I rotate in podcasts that have nothing to do with football. I'm just saying, if you're only getting your information from the same source, you're never going to be able to grow, and you can circle back this. We shouldn't be the only podcast you listen to. If you never listen to the GOAT District, first of all, shame on you. Second of all, go give Dan and JD a listen, because they come at things a completely different way than Jerry and I come at things, and that's how you will get better. Don't have your Svengali and the guy that's going to, lead you to the promised land. Have many. We call that none of us know as much as all of us. So Dan, what are you going to teach us over at the GOAT District on some upcoming pods with you and Mr. JD?
Well, we're going to be looking at running backs this week and just talking about what kind of factors are we looking at when we draft running backs. Why do we draft who we draft? Why do we ignore who we ignore? And so what sorts of things go into that whole analysis, and how do you decide when you want to draft running backs? What strategies do you want to use? Do you want to grab early ones, late ones? So we're just going to take a whole look at that running back position. And we've been going through, we did quarterbacks last week. We did tight ends the week before that, wide receivers. So we've been through most of the positions, and we just wanted to kind of take a little bit of time and just kind of talk about each position separately and what things are important that you need to look for as a dynasty owner. So that's what we're going to be doing this week.
All right, I'm going to hit you with a little question. Do you have a favorite veteran running back that you like, that you don't mind acquiring? Maybe he's a superstar and you think there's still some equity to buy, or maybe it's a rookie. Is there any I hate to put you on the spot because we're in so many leagues together. I could be prone to use this information against you. It's kind of how I roll. But are there a few guys that I know Jerry loves Kareem Hunt. He loves buying up cheap Kareem Hunt. What about you, man? Is there a couple of guys that you're looking at that position?
I mean, James White is just somebody who he's just so reliable.
God, I know Randy so much.
I love me some James White. I'll take him in Dynasty. I'll take him in redraft. I'll take him in best ball. The dude just goes out there and scores points. He's going to put a nice floor under there. He's going to have some hero weeks for you as well. So, he does a little bit of everything. And, you just know he's a Belichick favorite. And when you look at Cam Newton and what Cam Newton does well, and you look at James White, what James White does well, I mean, it's been a buying opportunity for a while. And then Roto World comes out with their stupid blurb today, tipping off everybody to James White that, James White and Cam Newton actually mesh very well together. Yeah, they do. And so, probably the good times are going to come to an end on that, because everybody's thinking about it now. But he's a guy I definitely love having.
Jerry, you got any surprise running backs out there that you might throw one on the way out?
See, you guys are all about the pass catching, ugly running backs.
Mm-hmm.
I like the plotters. I like the Jordan Howards and the Adrian Petersons of the world, and I just take them for a year because every single person on the planet hates them, and I'll take them for free. I don't expect much out of them, but if I can get anything out of them, I will take it. And I think Adrian Peterson's going to have a pretty good year. Everybody, to circle it back around on the Greg Olsen talk we had earlier, people hate old guys, man. No offense to you guys. You guys are spring chickens. But so I'm gonna take AP. Everybody's talking about Antonio Gibson. the great messiah that has come down to save fantasy leagues. Get out of here.
I'll be honest. When you said Jordan Howard, I threw up a little bit in my mouth. I was like, oh,
See?
But here's the thing. People think he's quote unquote old. He will not be 26 until November. My man's 25 years old. Isn't he? It feels like, again, Jordan Howard fatigue. He's been around forever.
Let's circle this back around to Dan earlier. You know, the age on these running backs, they can just fall off so quickly. Mm-hmm. It's all of a sudden, like Jordan Howard was what? Probably like RB 8 or 9 at some point in his like first or his second year, and now Randy's throwing up in his mouth just by me mentioning the man's name.
Now Jordan Howard is going after James White, who is and James White's what, 28, 29, something like that. So, you know, it's just kind of funny how that works. But you know, he's going in the same range as like a Tony Pollard or a Kerryon Johnson. You know, he's kind of in the never was or the washed up back area. Sony Michel, you know, so
the Jerry of podcasters.
So, you know, he's just right in that range. But, you know, Howard's going to have something to say this year. I don't mind a little bit of Howard. I'd rather have Breda, but I don't mind a little bit of Howard either.
You know, you didn't have to say that name because Matt Breda, that's my guy. I love pass catching backs. If you go to Chan Gailey, the new offensive coordinator in Miami, his most recent 2 years, I think it was 15 and 16, if I remember correctly. And the running backs that year, each year had over 100 targets to the running back position. And last time I checked, Jordan Howard, good between the tackles, not the best pass catcher. So where do I think the lion's share of those touches in the receiving game will go to the running backs? It's obviously going to be Matt Breda. It's a PPR world. Graham Barfield and Scott Barrett of Fantasy Points did the work for me, so I will always both cite and credit them with that work. But a target is worth 2.8 times more than a rush attempt. So for that reason, I'm obviously in on Matt Breda. But listen, this has been a great show. I love doing this. I love really focusing the War Zone back on Dynasty. Again, if you're not listening to the GOAT District, they drop again middle to the end of the week, sometimes Wednesday, Thursday, once in a blue moon Friday on all these major podcasting things. Make sure you go over, you hit the pause button. You know, you're at the end of the podcast anyway. Go over to the rating and review section of the show. Leave us a 5-star. Leave us a review. Don't forget to subscribe. And while you're there, do all those same nice things for our boys over at the GOAT District. And on behalf of Dan of the GOAT District and on behalf of Jerry here at the Dynasty War Zone, we are just trying to make the world a better place for fantasy football. We'll see you back here next week with more Dynasty goodness. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Well, there you go, gentlemen. That is a podcast.
That's how you do it.
Excellent. Dan,
thank you so much, man.
Absolutely. And now I know there is no way I'm getting Breda off you. I was pretty sure of it already.
Yeah, I went around and scooped him up absolutely everywhere. I got him from Garrett Price of the Dynasty Nerds, for JJ Taylor of the Patriots, and a third. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, right around our rookie draft, and I was like, because I have Leonard Fournette and Eckler in that league that I finished second in last year, but running back depth in this COVID era is going to be the new hotness.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I love that. I sent you, I don't know, probably over a month ago. I sent you that Breda offer. I was like, I wonder, you know, it was a decent offer, but yeah, it wasn't enough of an overpay. So
in the GOAT leagues right now, I am so, I don't want to say thin, but I don't have any depth to spare at running back.
Yeah,
I've got to hang on. So, but I appreciate it, man. And listen, if you guys, you can tell JD, obviously JD knows how to get a hold of me too. If you guys ever need me, I'll volunteer Jerry. You got to get Jerry on a Tuesday or Wednesday on the GOAT District. We'd be more than happy to reciprocate and have you come on your guys' show if you need the help.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. And yeah, we definitely need to get you guys back on again. It's been too long. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely, man. Well, hey, good luck with your show, and thank you for tuning in. We'll be tagging you in the show tomorrow.
All right. Sounds good. I'll be retweeting away.
All right. See
you,
always
Dan.
Good, Dan. Hey, and Jerry, I'll keep you for just a second. See you, Dan.
Yeah.
I don't need you to stick around. Kyle helped me with the Patreon last night.
Cool.
We talked about how to leave a league.
Ah, okay.
So in case you haven't noticed, the Warzone rants are going to get a lot stronger now that we're.
That's fine.
It's time for the
fuck the world and everybody in it.
I don't care if one person listens. I really don't give a shit. I'm not going to tell you what you need to hear. Well, I am going to tell you what you need to hear. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. Yeah, fuck that. Get that shit out of here. It's for 4-year-olds. So I think this was a great show. I think Dan's the best guest that we get.
Dan's always good, man.
So, hey, we got to cut the open real quick. You ready to cut it open?
Yeah. We doing it on here?
Yeah, might as well. It's being. Okay. We're still live.
Nah, fuck it.
Yeah, fuck it. Yeah, I'm gonna end this broadcast.
Peace.
Bye bye. Yeah. So yeah, you just heard me and Jerry, and yes, I do think Dan is the best guest.